Hello everyone, and welcome to Now You're Playing with Power, a Nintendo podcast. My name is NBZ, and I am your illustrious host for this week of every second week of which we do this, as I always am. And I always am, as I always am, I am always am, joined by my co-host, it's Valley.
Green eggs and ham to you, NBZ.
Green eggs and ham right back at you, my friend. Dr. Seuss, philosopher, scholar, Mr. Bally here.
Sam I am.
Very well versed in the rhymes of such a man. So, hello. Anyway, that was an interesting introduction.
I don't know where we're going.
How are you doing, Bally? How are you?
I'm doing very well, yes. Playing plenty of video games, loads of Smash Brothers, loads of other games. It's great.
It's a good time. It's a good time all around. So, I guess we're going to get into today's show. We have some segments coming up for you, and Bally is going to tell you what those are going to be.
We've got what we've been playing, we have your emails, and then for this week's third segment, we are going to be talking a bit about gaming guides. When we use them, why we like them, why we hate them, all the ins and outs.
Our opinions lay within.
Our opinions.
So, be ready. Be ready for that. But of course, as always, we're going to kick things off with the stuff we've been playing in the last couple of weeks. Bally, how about you tell us what you've been digging into?
I have been playing a game that came out right at the start of this year.
Trying to get it in there before our Game of the Year discussions happen, I see.
Exactly, just trying to squeeze it in there. This was a game I was quite close to getting when it came out earlier this year. And that game, of course, is Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze.
Now, does it have country still in the title?
Yes,
it's still Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze.
It is Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. And I've never played a Donkey Kong Country game, apart from a little bit of the remake of the first one on Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, now how did you come across this? I seem to remember a weird story involving this game.
You do? I'm not aware of this weird story. I'm pretty sure
Isn't it like a game you found behind a sofa? Or
that was Zelda Oracle of Ages.
Right, yeah.
Which was found behind the back of a sofa.
We'll get to that when you play that game eventually, I guess.
I will definitely play that eventually. Although I think the battery in that cartridge is gone, so
I'll
probably have to download it. But
sure.
I digest. I was talking about was digress. Digest.
Well, you have to see in dinner, so I guess you are in the process
I've got
of
food
digesting.
on the brain. I digress. How do you get rid of your dinner? I digress it. You know?
Yeah, you do.
And when I want to change topic, I digest.
You do. All right. Well, let's get back to Donkey Kong, shall we?
Where is this?
So when did you play the GBA game? Did you own it?
I owned it. Yeah. It's still sitting in my room right now. I played maybe a world or two. This was back when I was very young, when the Game Boy Advance came out, and I played hardly any of it really, and wasn't very good at it.
Right, I mean, this was when Nintendo on the GBA were just remaking the hell out of every Super Nintendo game they could get their hands on, so...
I mean, it's not got the same pizzazz that, Tropical Freeze has.
Right.
In terms of the music and the art and all those glorious things I'm going to get to. But
right, I guess if you want to start with pizzazz, it's a pretty looking game. It's definitely a good looker.
A very pretty looking game. I go on a lot about pretty looking games on this podcast, and I'm not going to ruin it by saying that this one doesn't match the rest, because it definitely does. It's right up there with the top ones.
Right, and kind of in stark contrast now when you think about how bad the original Donkey Kong countries now look, that art style, that kind of going for the 3D weird thing they went with it doesn't really hold up these days.
That sort of 3D in a 2D plane feels a lot like Trine. Like you can the scope of the depth you can see backwards looks so nice and like really well done. The art style is amazing, and I actually think that a number of levels, especially the ones based on the Savannah Plains, feel really. It feels a lot like Disney, the cartoon style, and especially this one world, which feels just like The Lion King. I can't emphasize enough how much this world feels like The Lion King. There's
I saw some of your Miiverse screenshots there, and they really did, I have to say.
So, yeah, just like it. And even the music, which obviously you can't hear on the screenshot on the Miiverse, but just really, really sort of the Disneyfication of a video game, this felt like. So when I picked it up, DK, he handles in a really weird way. I'd liken this game to almost Yoshi's Island in that ultimately it's a very, very solid platformer, just like Yoshi's Island. But the physics with Yoshi and DK for this game are very unusual. DK, he feels like a heavy ape, which is appropriate because he is a heavy ape, and it really feels as far from Mario as you possibly can, almost. I mean, there's no run button. You're jumping on enemies. You're rolling. You're slapping the ground. You're climbing. Yeah. There's a lot of climbing in this game. Swinging.
I mean, that's the thing. To get momentum in this game, you have to use that roll because there's no real other way to move yourself further than you would otherwise be able to.
Yeah, exactly. And the first level or so, I actually played with yourself in co-op.
Yeah, we did.
I was just at your house, and I was like, let's just do a co-op mission. You've obviously played DK Returns before.
Right, I've played the 3DS version, and on that game they actually have like a casual mode, which allows you to have extra 2 hearts, which makes things much more bearable, and kind of allowed me to get through that game, I feel.
Whereas this is much more hardcore, back to the 2 hearts and then 4 hearts when you have Diddy, Dixie, or Cranky.
Exactly, yeah.
But that initial playtime we had together, we just did the very first level in co-op, and I thought it controlled terribly. I was really like, what have I invested in? This controls really badly, and on top of that, and there's no defense for this, the co-op just feels terrible. I think the level design just doesn't fit co-op at all. I think it's too narrow almost
it doesn't, and I think this makes sense in the context of DK as a platformer. I always kind of think the spectrum of Nintendo platformers goes Kirby, Mario, Donkey Kong, with Donkey Kong on the far end of difficult, Kirby on the easy, and Mario somewhere in the middle. And when it comes to being precise and trying to get really difficult platforming done, DK in co-op is not the way to go. I think Kirby works much better for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so I took the game back home, obviously. I've been playing it the last 2 weeks, and World 1 grew on me. I got better at the platforming. It became more natural. I've been using the analog stick. I know you used the D-pad for DKC Returns.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
So I don't know why, but for me the analog stick with the Pro Controller just felt more natural. And I really got into the swing of things, you might say.
Hey.
It really, like, after a while, the platforming feels really natural, really great, and I'm really liking it as a 2D platformer. Another part of the game I'm really liking is the ability where you can have either Dixie, Diddy, or Cranky on your back, and they all have unique attributes where
special abilities.
Special abilities. Cranky can pogo stick a bit like Shovel Knight or Scrooge McDuck.
Yep.
Obviously, Dixie Kong is probably the best because she provides you effectively with a double jump almost.
And she also has a little bit of a hover before she goes up as well. So it's kind of built-in hover
like
plus boost.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of extra height. And then Diddy Kong, as far as I'm aware, he's got the same ability as he had in DKC Returns, which is the jetpack. So you get a bit of a hover, a bit of a glide, basically, which is nice. Another area of the game I'm really liking is the water levels. Now, most games, and I'm mainly hearing this from you, NBZ, games like the Mario universe, whether that's 2D or 3D or other games that you've played, you really have an issue with like water levels.
Yeah, it's really to do with the control of the character underwater and how that handles, and the idea of being in free space, it just doesn't work that well in video games. Fundamentally, I just think it's something that people still have not been able to figure out. And, I played one of my favorite games this year, Bayonetta 2, that had underwater segments. Still not great, because, it's very hard to pull that stuff off. I was like, okay, Bayonetta, can you be the game to buck the trend? No, it couldn't, and doesn't do it for me.
See, in my opinion, this is the game that bucks the trend. And I'm not going to try and say that, it handles like you're not in water when you're in the water, because yes, it is still very floaty, and it's not as precise as being on land, and I don't think it's ever meant to be. But I think that there's a number of factors that, in my opinion, make the water levels really great. Because there's an entire world based on water levels. I think it's World 5, I want to say, in this game. No, not World 5, sorry, World 4. And I was really worried that they would be a bit sort of repetitive, a bit annoying. But in fact, the combination of the music and the art and just the way that I think DK handles, and especially the way that DK handles with Dixie, Diddy, and Cranky on his back. So they all have different abilities underwater as well as on land.
Oh, they change, do they?
Exactly. So Cranky waggles his stick out in front of him like you have a little attack, basically, which is quite handy. Dixie's hair basically becomes a motor, which is a really nice way of having consistent propulsion through the water, because normally you're pressing Y to do a little spin. It's almost a bit like swimming when you're in Skyward Sword or something like that. It's like a spin sort of jump, and that helps DK propel himself forward. But Dixie's propeller is much more consistent, and you can just keep holding it, which is really nice. And then you've got Diddy Kong, who has sort of like a sudden burst of speed with his jetpack. And I think the combination of these factors plus the art and the music and just some really great enemies underwater. For example, there's a massive octopus that's in the background, and it's spraying ink at you, and the ink is rising up the stage, and you're basically forced to speedrun through the entire level vertically upwards underwater. And it's really fun. I didn't think it would be fun, and when it started I was like, this is going to be really tough, and it was tough, but I thought it was fair, and it's not platforming in the traditional sense because you're floating, like you said, but it just felt really great. And like, I wish more games were like this, because I think the handling in something like 2D New Super Mario Bros. U underwater levels are just horrible. Like,
they kind of have never gone back to fix what they had in the first place. Like, it almost still feels like Mario 3 was still kind of pressing the A button to go up and down. Yeah. So the thing with Donkey Kong that's always been interesting to me is how much of a contemplative platformer it is, in the sense that you really have to think quite a bit if you want to get past challenges, but it also forces you forward with quite a bit of speed. Like, you don't have that much time to think about situations in certain levels. I mean, we were doing a level today where you're jumping on like some goop and stuff, and there are a lot of parts of that where you're like, oh, right, okay, I need to make sure I'm thinking, I need to get to this platform to make it spin around, but you don't necessarily have that much time because maybe there's an enemy coming towards you. So it kind of blends these elements, and I think that's something that makes it quite tough, but also quite rewarding in the end. Yeah,
exactly. There's loads of levels. Each level, I thought that the basic formula would get repetitive. I mean, it's just 2D platforming, it's DK, blah, that's it, done. But the levels mix stuff up so much that it makes it really playable. So like the level you were just describing, it's almost like kind of like a puzzle going on at the same time. And then other levels, there's plenty of minecart levels, there's like a boat level, there's the barrel jetpack level, it basically is, and there's all these different levels that force you to play the game in a very different way. Did I say Rambi levels? There's and there's also, like I was saying with the octopus, there's other levels like similar to that where it forces you to speed run the level. Like, something is chasing you and you're forced to play the game in a different way. Like, I really think that this game excels at not staying too long on one game mechanic, and kind of keeps trying to reinvent itself to some degree, level on level.
Yeah, it's definitely a game where you have to have intense focus, and when it comes to the bosses, I think that couldn't be any closer to the truth, right?
Yeah, they require so much dedication and they take a really long time, and it's all based because they have really long sequences that you have no way of breaking. You're forced into hitting them at specific points of the sequence, and at the times where you're not attacking them, you're purely just trying. You're just trying to avoid everything they're throwing at you. And with 4 hearts or 2 hearts, it's really difficult.
Yeah, it's really memorization, honestly.
Exactly, it's completely memorization after a while, and pure platforming prowess. And I mean, I've not finished this game. I'm now into the final world, and yeah, the bosses have been a real tough part.
To the point at which I had to beat one for you today.
Exactly. Oh my god, so embarrassing. So yeah, you were around earlier, and we were playing the 5th world boss, which I won't spoil, but yeah, God,
he's a bastard. Tough. I'll tell you, he's a bastard.
Such a bastard. So yeah, I've got a while to go, but absolutely loving this game so far. It's definitely up there for Game of the Year,
contention,
which will all be revealed before the year is out. But I'll give my final impressions of this game next time, when I should have hopefully finished it.
Excellent. You're very close to the end, I think so.
Yeah,
should be heading there pretty soon. Well, if that's that for you, aside from trucking along with Assassin's Creed whenever you can, I guess I'll talk about what I've been playing. I have finally finished a project that has been going on for a few months now. I did talk about it maybe, 4 or 5 shows ago. It is Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies. So of course this is the downloadable only game in Europe and North America. It was a boxed copy in Japan, but of course they had to put it on the eShop here, which was good because there was a deal and it was 12 quid, and I was like, damn, I'm doing that because it wasn't going to go down any other time. So yeah, I've been playing that, and I finally finished it, and I think it's fantastic. This is, in fact, the 3rd game involving Phoenix Wright that I've beaten this year, because I played Trials and Tribulations at the top of the year in January. I finished that, having started it in end of 2013, and then I also played Leighton vs. Wright in May, which I blitzed through pretty quickly. That's probably the fastest I've ever played one of those type of games. But this one, definitely longer than Leighton vs. Wright. It's coming 27 or 8 hours or so. So
wow.
Yeah, it really was quite a long one. I think the difference is there's a lot of pacing issues I think Phoenix Wright games have in general, and it's not something they can necessarily fix just because it's the way that they roll. But Leighton vs. Wright broke it down into 1 hour chunks, as I kind of talked about before, and I found that very satisfying because I could, play every night and do a solid hour and feel like I'd achieved something and got somewhere. And I feel Phoenix Wright, this game has, addressed a lot of those issues and made them quite a bit better, mainly in the investigation part, which before was a little more point-and-click adventure, where you'd be going around trying to find clues and evidence and talking to people and trying to get stuff from them, and you would sometimes find yourself wandering and not knowing where to go, what to do, or who to talk to, and the game didn't do a very good job of communicating that. Back in the day, the DS ones were kind of bare bones in that department, but what they've done here is they've really boiled it down, and they've made it a much more linear experience in the investigation part, which I think maybe some people will be disappointed by, because it doesn't mean you're kind of digging in there yourself and going and finding the clues out and discovering it all. But I feel it just makes it more playable. The linearity helps, and there are a few ways they do that. So one of them is, previously in Phoenix Wright games, whenever you went to an area, you could click the examine button, and what that allowed you to do was use the touchscreen to pinpoint an object, and then the characters would say some dialogue about it. If it was important, they would add it to the evidence log, and then you would perhaps use it in trial later on. Now what they do is they only allow you to examine areas that the game thinks you should examine. So it says, okay, we're in this area, we're going to examine this now, and then it basically forces you to do all the examining and just have it localized, so you're not wasting time in places. You either are talking to someone or you're examining, and you always know what you're doing, which is really nice. So they kind of pinpoint it that way, which that's great. It just means I don't have to worry about, coming back to the game and being like, oh, what do I need to do now? I can't remember. And I did have that issue back in January with Trials and Tribulations because I was in the middle of like the third case and I didn't know what was going on, so I had to go back and read up what had happened, and that takes a lot of time, which I'd rather not spend.
So do you think this game might actually be better for someone like myself who's never played one to try and get into the series, based on, like you said, it's easier to get back into?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about Dual Destinies is it's so far down in the narrative of the story that
That's
you
true, exactly.
won't know any of these characters.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, it's a localized, overarching narrative, so you don't have to have any sort of knowledge of the previous games to enjoy it, but there is a lot to dig into there in terms of references and kind of things which will be relevant from the past, which will maybe come up in the future, and lots of cameos from characters who you won't know otherwise. So to that extent, I'd say it probably isn't a good place, but mechanically, it definitely is. But as I said before earlier this year, I'd say Leighton vs. Wright is definitely a better jumping in point, just because it's a much easier game, and there's no, extra context you need. It's Leighton and Wright. There's no background there. It's just, those two characters in the universe together. It works really well. So another thing they do in just the examination part is, previously when you clicked on things, you wouldn't know it was this problem of being like, have I searched everything in this room or not? And you wouldn't know, because sometimes you would click a thing and then go back and maybe the information was there and you'd missed it. In this game, that puts a little tick mark every time you've investigated a certain object, so you always know, okay, I've already covered that, I don't need to read any more about it, it's done and put to the side. So it's just kind of little things like that that make it a much smoother experience, which, I really appreciate, because these games are really all about the story, and I'd be lying if I said that, because they are, at their base, visual novels, as opposed to, I guess, pure games. They have a lot of, game elements to them, which make them enjoyable to dig through and kind of have you involved with them as you're figuring things out. But, the faster you get to the story elements, the better, I would say. So definitely good stuff there. I also would like to kind of address, the voice acting situation, because it's a little bit weird between this and Leighton vs. Wright. In that game, there was kind of this mixture where the voice acting would occur sometimes just during court cases or during investigations, and not just in cutscenes. There would obviously be voice acting in cutscenes, but this game just fully puts it in cutscenes, and there's nothing outside of that, aside from, shouting objection and hold it, and these tropes of the series that have been in every game. So I found that a little bit strange, considering that Leighton vs. Wright was in fact made before this game was, so I thought, this may
so
be the
they've
path.
gone backwards almost, you're saying?
Yeah, well, I can't remember whether it was Level 5 or it was Capcom who worked on Leighton vs. Wright, but they definitely have different voice actors. The voice actor for Phoenix is a different guy, I'm pretty sure. So it seems like a kind of a strange regression, but I don't know. Maybe there are probably reasons for that. It's a very long game. You can only fit so much, I guess, voice work in a 3DS cartridge. But I feel it would have been nice for them to kind of do that. But yeah, overall, I think the story has been fantastic. It's been really good. A lot of people criticized the game that came before this, which was Apollo Justice, where they introduced a brand new character and Phoenix Wright wasn't the center of it. And according to a lot of reports, Apollo wasn't a particularly interesting character. He didn't have great development, and he wasn't particularly likable in any way. But just from my perspective from this game, I think they did a really good job with him. They have a fantastic way that they interweave the story and tie it up at the end, and he is involved pretty deeply in that. You also have your new character, Athena Sykes, who has deep involvement in a lot of the later cases, and it does that Phoenix Wright thing where it leaves you these little breadcrumbs, these little clues as you go through each case, and slowly, one by one, the pieces fit together until you're like, a genius wrote this, because it all just fits like this perfect puzzle by the end. And man, there are some massive what the fuck moments, as there are in every Phoenix Wright game, I feel, but particularly the ending of this one is rather absurd, and I wouldn't have it any other way, honestly, because I enjoy those immensely, and I think they're very satisfying. So there you go. Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies. You should pick it up if you are a fan of the series. If not, then go and get the Phoenix Wright trilogy, which I think is out in December on 3DS. I think that's right.
I might have to try that next year.
These games are very Japanese, Bally, but I think you would really enjoy them. It's a very different thing than anything you've played before, but I certainly think that, for expanding your horizons and kind of trying a visual novel-esque thing, Phoenix Wright is the best place to jump in. There's no doubt about that.
Sweet.
So there you go. There has been one other thing that I played this week. It's a very, very small, short game. It's called A Bird Story. It's by a guy called Kan Gao, who made a game called To the Moon. I'm not sure if many of you will have heard of this, but it's a very story-driven experience. I guess kind of the theme of this episode for me on Steam that I played earlier this year, and it's just a beautiful game. It just tells this really heartwarming story that has science fiction elements and stuff with time travel and dreams and some great interesting stuff, and it's all done in this kind of 16-bit JRPG visual style, so it stands out pretty well, and I really enjoyed that earlier this year. I don't believe I actually got to talk about it on the podcast, but you'll probably be hearing about it come on Game of the Year stuff, because that really was one of my favorite things I played.
Is it the same visual style as To the Moon?
It is, yeah. It adopts the exact same visual style, but it's much, much shorter. It's only an hour long, and there's no dialogue. This is all told through animation and through the visual style and all that stuff. And, I certainly wouldn't say it's anywhere close to the quality of To the Moon in terms of the complexity of the story and the narrative, but it's a really sweet game. It's really nice, and it's just one of those experiences that you don't really find anywhere else, and I'm glad that they exist, because the medium doesn't always have to be about going around shooting people or jumping on people's heads, or there doesn't always have to be conflict for games to be effective, and this one certainly doesn't do much of that, and is great for it. So there you go. It's really cheap on Steam. Very short experience, but I'd recommend it.
Do you think a game like that would ever come to the Nintendo eShop?
Interesting question. There have been efforts by Nintendo to really push for more indies to get on their store, and certainly we are seeing that happening. Guacamelee came out this year, the Swapper came out. Those are big tentpole indie titles, and I certainly think something like To the Moon would fit really well on a Nintendo platform, given the visual style and obviously Nintendo's history with that kind of stuff on Super Nintendo. So I'd certainly love for them to try and do that, but at the moment, I think it's staying PC exclusive. There's no reason why it couldn't, even if it does come late, because a lot of these indie games, they're coming, but they are coming very late. They're coming kind of at a time where they're not really relevant to a lot of people anymore. But at least they're there, At least they're potentially available, so some people can play them.
And do you want to mention what you're going to be playing for next time?
Right. Oh, yes, I should. So I also I've been buying too many games recently. I'll tell you. There's Pokemon that's coming out. There's Smash that's coming out. Everything is just haywire. But I decided I am going to go back and fix a wrong, and that wrong is me not playing any Castlevania in my life ever. And I've decided now. I'm laying down the law, Bally. 2015 is the year of Castlevania for NBZ.
Hey, it's been my year of Metroid. You've got to have a year of Castlevania.
It has to be done, and of course, you know how big a fan of 2D Metroids I am. The fact that I've never played a Castlevania is something that needs to be corrected. So, I bought on the PlayStation Network Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which many people herald as the game that brought the term Metroidvania into existence, because it uses so many of those elements in it. And I'm playing it on my Vita. I have it here with me in London, and yeah, I've just started it. I haven't played too much, but it is looking pretty great so far. So yeah, that is going to be happening. I'm probably going to be talking about that next week, hopefully, alongside Smash Brothers and some other good stuff. But I'm saying, Bally, 2015. The thing is, Nintendo has to release the GBA Castlevanias in Europe for that to happen, which I'm hoping they will do, because they've been out in America for quite a while now. So as long as that does happen. That's
Yeah, it's always funny waiting for stuff to come out here. It's a bit frustrating, but
yeah. We get some stuff, they don't sometimes, but it just doesn't seem like it's often enough, does it? It's we always get left behind in the dark in the European territories. But
exactly.
So be it. So be it. In any case, I think that that pretty much closes out our segment. Thank you for listening to what we've been playing, but we shall now listen to you, because up next is our email segment. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be answering your emails when we get back. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, for the second part of the show. Of course, as usual, it's our email segment. We like to call it that. That's what it is. That's what we do. And of course, for this segment to exist, we need your participation. So, you can send in your emails, which we would like to hear, to our email address, which Bally will now tell you.
NYPPQuestions@gmail.com. Keep those electronic mails coming.
We need them. We'll want them. They are necessary. So, let's get into the segment. Bally, how's the first email?
First email is from Dominic. Hey NBZ, hey Bally. I have zero doubts that both of you are already looking forward to the new Wii U Zelda game, whenever that may be released. In Nintendo's E3 Direct, they called it Open World, and when people talk about the game, they oftentimes refer to it as the new Open World Zelda. However, Miyamoto has backpedaled a little since then, and is now hesitant to use that term to describe the new Zelda game. Here are my questions. Number 1. How vast do you guys think the new Zelda game will be, or how vast do you hope it's gonna be? What do you expect/want to be able to do in that world? The Wind Waker is my favourite game of all time, and one of the main reasons is its large world, which made me feel a sense of adventure no other Zelda game has ever been able to give to me. The Wii U Zelda will undoubtedly make that world look tiny in comparison, so I have high hopes that I'll feel this sense of adventure once again. Question number 2. What elements of past Zelda games do you guys want to see return in the new Zelda, and which features do you think should be left out? This includes gameplay and control aspects of the game, such as motion control and having your inventory on the Wii U gamepad. I think it's awesome of you guys to always want to include your listeners, so thank you for that and the great podcast in general. Keep it up. Dominic. P.S. Nintendo has to make a Toon Link amiibo figure, right? Right?
Well, Dominic, since you wrote this email to us, of course, Nintendo announced the third wave of Amiibo, which of course includes Toon Link. So
and your
you
favourite
don't have to
character, worry. Lucina, right? Or is it just Marth?
No.
No?
Lucina's not been announced yet. It's Shulk who's been announced.
Oh, Shulk, yeah, you're right. No, Lucina might be in
Shulk.
like one of the final waves.
Yeah, maybe. If that, I don't know if they're going to give her any love. But Shulk's there, and I'm certainly interested in getting Shulk at some point. But we have time to talk about amiibos in the future. That's not the here and now. The here and now is Wii U Zelda Bally, of course. So he opens his email talking about how Miyamoto backpedaled on the idea of open world to describe the new Zelda. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Nintendo in general just hate being categorized. Like, they even hate being called a gaming company. They see themselves as like an entertainment funhouse company. They don't
right? A madhouse, one might say.
Exactly. I don't think that by saying it's not an open world game necessarily means it's any less of an open world game. I think they just hate being categorized. That's my personal opinion, at least.
And I think something they hate more than anything else, even being categorized, is being compared. And of course, being compared directly to games like a Grand Theft Auto or a Red Dead Redemption or an Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
They don't like that comparison. And the buzzword for the Western kind of ideal is open world game. And I think really more than anything, it's not that Miyamoto is saying this is going to be any less of an open world than those games, but that he just doesn't want that name to be attached to this and for comparisons to be drawn in that way. He's just trying to back away, I feel personally, from that.
And I mean, look at it this way. What open world games do you know that will have in-depth dungeons, items in that way and stuff? I guess what's that game that has it?
Darksiders?
Darksiders
is like a clone of Zelda.
It's been compared to Zelda a lot, so I guess that's true. But I do think there will be plenty of new elements where Nintendo can firmly stake their claim that it's not purely an open world game. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Right.
But how big do we think this game is going to be?
So, according to Dominic, he feels it's going to dwarf the Wind Waker Open Sea. Do you feel like that is something that could potentially happen?
Wind Waker's a really funny one to try and categorize in terms of how big it is, because
right.
There's so much empty space. And like Dominic, I love the fact that Wind Waker's your favorite game of all time, because I'm totally with you on that one. But yeah, in terms of space, there's so little land in the Wind Waker when you actually think about it. I mean, there's quite a few towns and obviously numerous islands, and all those towns have so much character. But in terms of expansive land that isn't obviously the sea, it's very, there's not much of it. Like it's
quite sparse.
Yeah, it's camouflaging quite a moderately sized game as being an absolutely massive game by having the sea. Like it was a clever trick at the time because it allowed them to render islands far off in the distance or something like that. There was method to the madness at the time, and I really do think. Even though in terms of square feet or square meters, the new Zelda will probably be smaller because Wind Waker was just so large, I still think the new Wii U Zelda will still feel much bigger.
I think you're crazy. I think it's going to be way bigger than the Wind Waker
one. Really?
Even when you talk about square meters. Absolutely.
Oh, jeez. That's mental.
No. But I think the way Aonuma has been talking about this game, and the way they're positioning it, he wants to go back to the template set in the original Zelda, where you can go anywhere from the start and you have this massive world. If you think about how big the world of the original Zelda was comparative to the system it was on, and how that kind of worked, I think that they're going to try and go for the same sense of scale here, and they are already talking about, in the initial artwork and footage we have of it, of Aonuma sitting there and be like, hey, you see that mountain in the distance? You can go all the way over there.
I appreciate that, but that's nowhere near the scale of Wind Waker.
Well, I think you're being deluded, Bal. I honestly do.
Those squares in Wind Waker are absolutely huge. Like, they take minutes to sail over, bearing in mind that sailing is probably going to be faster than something like a horse or something. I mean... And
that's where I think you're deluded. You say they take minutes to sail over, right? And therein lies the problem, because sailing is not a very fast method of transportation. Comparative, I feel, to something like, being on a Epona and riding through the fields. So... especially, in Wind Waker, it did feel, the original one, it felt quite slow. Yeah. And I think that's kind of, making you feel like it's bigger than it actually is in terms of, square mileage. But
perhaps.
But I certainly think that Nintendo want to impress. I really just get that sense that Aonuma wants to blow this out the water. Let's just pun the hell out of it. Why don't we? And I think that they are going to try and do that. So I think it's going to be much bigger than you do, quite honestly.
Okay.
But we'll see. So, aside from that, his second question: what elements do you want to see return? What conventions do you think could be thrown out, and which ones should stay?
It's a really simple one, but I just thought the way the items were dealt with in the Wind Waker HD remake were just it's very simple, but it was perfect. It was so easy, just sliding the item you want onto the God, get my words out. Mapping it onto a button was just so simple, and I hope they return that. I mean, that's not thinking very outside the box at all, but
No, but I mean inventory management,
Yeah.
bringing everything on the HUD down to the gamepad. Not only will that free space up on the main screen for you to view Zelda in all its glory and those beautiful visuals, but it also makes things much more convenient. And I don't think they need to innovate when it comes to Zelda and gamepad implementation. They just need to do the simple stuff. They need to execute on it well, do it right, and I think that's just about everything that can be done, honestly. I mean, everyone wants Nintendo to prove the gamepad's worth and to try it. At this point, I think there's not really any point. We're kind of beyond repair for Wii U when it comes to that kind of thing, and I don't think even Nintendo justifying the system using something like Zelda in a superbly innovative way is going to change their fortunes. So why even bother?
I really
say.
don't think there will be the Wiimote used at all. And to be honest, I hope that they don't, because we've done that. It was great, but I'm happy to go back to buttons.
Certainly, yeah, I certainly think that they should kind of keep things simple.
Yeah, like
regarding
Skyward
that
Sword
stuff.
is now forever in people's collections, and if you want to experience a Zelda where you are swinging Link's sword in a realistic fashion, then play that game. But it's time to move on.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly interested to see how they'll handle dungeon structure in this game as well. How much will they build on the stuff they established in Link Between Worlds? Because I know that was another thing, another convention that Aonuma wanted to shake up when it came to Zelda. So, very curious to see if they find some more interesting ways to kind of build that stuff into the world.
And I mean, E3 2015 is looking like the hot time for all of these kind of questions to be answered. I could easily imagine some sort of trailer or them demonstrating in some way some cool new item. In the same way this like the beetle had a big impact in Skyward Sword. I can
Certainly,
see
yeah.
them announcing something soon. And I mean, obviously, December 2015, we have Star Wars coming out, and we had that teaser trailer the last week. So
Oh boy, you and I are just
exactly.
so excited
So I
for
mean,
that.
Zelda's got some catching up to do if they want to hit that December time frame. They're gonna have to show some more soon. So
Look, let me tell you, if November, December next year we get Star Wars, Zelda Wii U, and Uncharted 4, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I think I might explode from sheer joy. It could be a crazy time.
that would be amazing.
Yeah, certainly something I'm looking forward to. A huge amount. So, there you go. Thank you for those questions, Dominic. Some great stuff there, and hope you email in again. So, there we go.
Well, our next email is from Jyflosion. NBZ and Bally, it's Jyflosion again with another question. What are your top 5 played games by playtime in your activity log? And he's referring to the Nintendo 3DS. His are number 1, Pokemon X, 391 hours. Wow. Number 2, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, 246 hours. Number 3, Fire Emblem Awakening at 105 hours. Number 4, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies at 80 hours. And his number 5 is Animal Crossing New Leaf at 77, almost 78 hours. P.S. Congratulations on finally getting a release date for Shovel Knight in EU. Lol. Well, we have now played that game. Finally.
Yes.
Thank God.
Finally.
And it
I
was
believe he's
marvelous.
referring to the fact that he asked for our opinions on it on his last email, and we couldn't talk about it because it hadn't come out at that time.
Ah,
But,
right. Yes.
It is now, and we have most thoroughly enjoyed it. And, yeah, we'll probably be talking about it for.
And I must say, those playtimes are kind of dwarf mine, to be honest, by a very, very long way.
Well, you take a look at the kind of games in his top list, they are ones which make sense to be being played for that long. Animal Crossing's an obvious suspect. Monster Hunter, again, is one of those. And Pokemon and Fire Emblem, they're very replayable, and Pokemon is just, obviously, he's going to be someone who plays competitive, so that is something that makes a lot of sense.
Shall we do our top 10s or top 5s?
We can go do our top 10s if you want.
10?
If you want to let
start?
people know. Sure. I did want to make mention of his Phoenix Wright time at 80 hours, which has he replayed it like 5 times? Because that seems slightly ridiculous to me. but there you go. That's the one that seems a little out of place. So how about instead of going through our top 5, we go through our top 10, but in reverse order, Bally, to keep suspense at its maximum. All right, so how about you kick it off, Bally, with your number 10?
My number 10 is Luigi's Mansion 2 at 17 hours and 44 minutes.
My number 10 is Pilot Wings Resort at 20 hours and 15 minutes. So I'm already ahead of you there.
Oh, God. My number 9 is Zelda Link's Awakening DX at 19 hours and 27 minutes.
My number 9 is Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies 26-26. Nice symmetry going on there.
My number 8 is Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, surprisingly, at 19 hours 37. Yes, I have actually played a lot of that game.
Yes. My number 8 is The Street Pass Me Plaza at 27 hours 27 minutes.
My number 7 is The Legend of Zelda A Link Between Worlds, 20 hours and 32 minutes.
My number 7 is Fire Emblem Sacred Stones. It is at 32 hours and 2 minutes.
My number 6 is The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks at 23 hours 47 minutes.
My number 6 is Mario and Luigi Dream Team Brothers, 38 hours 40.
Wow. Wow. My number 5 is The Street Pass Me Plaza, which is 26 hours 23 minutes.
Oh, an hour behind me with the Street Pass there. My number 5 is Animal Crossing. It is 46 hours 34 minutes.
My number 4 is Super Mario 3D Land at 30 hours 35 minutes.
My number 4 is Mario Kart 7. Almost at 50, but we're at 48 hours 15.
Oh wow, I'll mention that in a second. My number 3 is Pilot Wings Resort, so a little higher than your list, at 33 hours and 9
Jeez, yeah, you played
minutes.
A solid 13 hours more of Pilot Wings than I have.
It was my only game I owned on the system for a long time, but yeah,
for
love
like
that
9 months.
Love that game.
My number 3 is Super Smash Bros. On 3DS at 61 hours.
Oh. My number 2 is Mario Kart 7 at 48 hours 39 minutes.
Jeez, you've passed me.
By 15 minutes or something. Tiny.
Crazy.
Yeah.
My number 2 is Fire Emblem Awakening, 89 hours 34, and that is sure to increase as I have my LP ongoing.
And my number 1 is Super Smash Brothers for the 3DS at 50 hours and a minute.
Excellent. My number 1, again jumping quite a stretch, it's Pokemon X, 342 hours and 25 minutes, but you all understand why that is. At this point, I don't think of it as a game, more as a lifestyle choice. So,
wow.
So there you go. Yes, indeed.
Right.
So there you go. Those are our top 10s, because we gave you more than we were asked for. That's the kind of podcast we are.
I hope that was fascinating for everyone, and everyone now realizes how little I play in relation to you, NBZ.
Yeah, well,
on the 3DS.
Yeah, I guess.
It'd be interesting if we could do a Wii U version, because I reckon I might be beating you in some ways.
Yeah, the Wii U just... I really wish they'd kept the same format, because the 3DS does it in such a great way. It's all categorized in a really easy to look at and break it downable format. Wii U, I don't know, they need to update that. It's nowhere near as good as the 3DS one is. So, do that, Nintendo. Come on, get your act together. Alright.
So, we have a question from Priam. This is kind of a random question, but I wanted to know how many or which languages you both know. I would like to know your opinion on the clone characters of Super Smash Bros. 4 as well as the limited tome use on Robin.
Tome?
Tome?
Tome.
What?
It's like a magical tome.
Okay, sure. I don't even know what a tome is, anyway. Right. P.S. NBZ, I would like it if you answered in your Indian accent, and I would love it if Bally tried to imitate.
Well, come on, Bally, give us an Indian accent.
This is going to be horrible, but let's... right. You have to go first. I have to copy.
Alright, so Bally, what language do you speak?
What language I speak?
Yeah, what do you do?
I speak English.
Oh, very good.
And as well as English, I speak English.
Oh, very good.
Very
yeah,
good.
Two language.
Yeah.
Two. I speak four language.
Four language?
First, Gujarati, Punjabi.
Yeah.
I speak Irish. I speak English, Scottish, European. Okay, let's cut the bullshit. I speak one language.
Yes.
Yeah, I am Indian in descent, as a few of you will know, but I don't actually speak any Indian languages. I don't speak Hindi or Punjabi or anything like that because I never learned them when I was younger. So I'm purely an English speaker. Bali is the same. There's no Gaelic going on in Bali's vocabulary.
Although I have quite a lot of bilingual family, which is very depressing because I can keep up.
Just makes us feel
all.
dumb, right?
Exactly.
God.
Although we both did a bit of French, but we can't really speak much of it.
No,
I
certainly not. Can't lay claim to that at all. So there you go.
Tome.
Yeah, he wants to know our opinions on clone characters in Smash 4. I've really kind of calmed my opinion on this, honestly, because I was kind of enraged at a point, but when you kind of step back and think about it, if you view it from the perspective of Sakurai didn't necessarily have the time to implement new characters, but had the time to put in the clones just for the hell of it, then I think it's a much easier pill to swallow. It's not the fact that he spent time making clones that could have been spent on other characters. I think that, he flat out did his best to do as many characters as possible, and, you should just view the clones as a bonus, honestly. They're nothing that you shouldn't be complaining about, honestly, so... That's what I think. And
your favourite character is a clone.
Yeah, well, so is yours, technically.
So,
if you want to get, technical about it.
Yeah.
We actually had an interesting matchup playing today where it was like Bizarro World of our normal matchup. It was me playing as Marth and you as normal Link. And it's like, whoa, we're playing the real versions of our characters.
Real versions, exactly.
Yeah.
Toon Link's so much better, he is.
Any further opinions on the clones, Bally? Or?
I don't mind clone characters to boost the roster in any way. I think they're great, and I know that they're not necessarily clone characters, but I love that there are the clone costumes. For example, Alpha and Olimar. I love that, and Bowser Jr. with all the Koopa kids. I think that's a nice touch as well.
Totally.
So, yeah, I don't really mind. I'm definitely a lot more calm about it than I was before.
Yeah, certainly.
So what about tomes?
Yeah, the way Robin plays is really, really fascinating because you have to kind of manage the amount of magic you're using and switch things up between the sword and the magic. And you really haven't played a lot of Robin Bally.
No.
I have played quite a bit more, and I'm trying to get better with him / her, but. Yeah, it's definitely a wrinkle that I think was necessary to make that character more interesting and more diverse, and to kind of make him and her stand out from the roster.
Yeah, I mean,
otherwise, the current Fire Emblem characters we have.
Otherwise, all the Fire Emblem characters would just be sword wielding, fast characters, and Robin is completely different in a way with all that magic stuff and.
The thing I love about it is how faithful it is to the Fire Emblem series with, you only have a limited number of uses for weaponry and for magic. So if you use it too much, hey, it's going to break and disappear. And it's just those type of elements in Smash Brothers are things that I can really appreciate because it's drawing from the source material in a way that is more meaningful than just, a costume or anything like that. So it's great stuff.
Cool. I think we've got time for one more question.
We may do.
So this question is from Bruno Garcia. Hello, NBZ and Bally. My question for this week is the following: how would you do Smash Brothers DLC? I wouldn't mind paying $5 or $6 for a new character and stage pack. For example, it would be cool to see Shovel Knight and Pridemore Keep stage. Oh wow! I know Shovel Knight is highly unlikely, but that leads into another question. If they did go with the character stage packs, what DLC characters / stages would you like to see? Thanks again for this highly entertaining podcast.
Right. Well, interesting time to talk about the DLC because I believe Sakurai has done a little bit of chatter about the DLC himself.
Has
kind of saying, yeah, I believe there was an interview somewhat recently where he was saying, we have no plans currently for DLC. And, you can interpret that as you will. It may be like Sakurai trying to troll people again, as he is wont to do. It may be him just saying, look, guys, I've worked on this fucking game for 3 years straight, and I'm almost dead because of it. Give me a break. I might do DLC, but just, let's step back for a moment. And you could interpret it as, hey, we're not going to do any, which is a little weird considering the way that they've positioned the Mewtwo thing. So I don't know if DLC is necessarily on the cards, but we can still talk about it, right? And kind of speculate.
Yeah, when Mario Kart came out, I feel like hardly anyone talked about DLC that much for Mario Kart. We all said, oh yeah, it'd be really nice if it happened, but,
right.
Nintendo would never do that. It's Nintendo. They're never going to do DLC. And then all of a sudden, earlier this year, they announced Mario Kart DLC, and everyone flipped their shit. And then the second that happened, and obviously Smash Brothers was already going to come out and is now out, I feel like the only reason we're expecting DLC is because of that Mario Kart DLC, and we now have
and the Mewtwo thing as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That factors into it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it will happen. Why not? There's money to be made there.
Right, certainly. And, Smash Brothers already has sold more copies in its, first run than any Wii U game to date. It is the fastest selling Wii U game in North America, and it probably will be in Europe as well when those stats come out. Nintendo would be kind of stupid not to, but I definitely think Sakurai is kind of taking a backseat at the moment, and, we'll probably see stuff, but not until maybe late next year, I would imagine. So it does take a long time to make characters and probably stages as well. But let's do a little bit of speculation here. What would you like to see if there was a combination of a pack of a stage and a character? Who would you go for?
So, like I've said, even in this show, my favorite game of all time is Wind Waker. There is no Wind Waker stage in this game, which is a real shame.
Do they not bring back the ship from Brawl?
Not to my knowledge.
It may be. Look, disclaimer: all the stages are not currently unlocked on Bally's copy of Smash Brothers, so it may be there.
I'm almost certain, but let's pretend it's not there.
Okay,
and I'm really angry.
Okay, you're angry.
It'd be really nice if there was a new Wind Waker stage, and with it, perhaps a character. I don't know who. Maybe Tetra or something, or I don't really know, but that would be nice. I think the suggestion of Shovel Knight and Pridemore Keep is incredible. I don't know the logistics of getting Shovel Knight into the game with such a small developer and that kind of thing. I mean, what do you think?
I certainly think there's a possibility, but you look at the third-party characters that are currently there, and they are like the 3 biggest hitters in history, right?
Yeah.
The 3 classics, Mega Man, Sonic, and Pac-Man.
That's true.
I'm not sure Shovel Knight stands alongside those. It also certainly deserves to, because that game is fantastic. If we're talking third-party characters, I think in keeping that classic theme going. Someone from Castlevania, one of the Belmonts, like Simon Belmont or something like that. And of course, me starting to get into Castlevania now, that would make a lot of sense. But those guys are really unique. The way that they move and the fact that their main weapon is a whip. We haven't seen anything like that in Smash Brothers before. So certainly, I would love to see some representation of Castlevania being put into Smash Brothers, or even something from some of the lower tiered franchises like Golden Sun and that kind of thing. A lot of people want to see Isaac from Golden Sun in the game, and at this point there isn't actually an assist trophy representing him, so there is a possibility, and that could potentially happen. So yeah, I guess those are my picks, but
I think
it would be cool.
Like I said, I've just been playing Tropical Freeze. It'd be nice if there was another really interesting DK stage and maybe a character that like Dixie or Cranky that went along with that. That'd be okay. It wouldn't blow anyone's mind away, but it'd be nice, and I'd happily pay for that.
There may well be a new stage coming with Mewtwo. We don't know that yet, but that would be amazing if they did. Maybe I don't know, the underwater cave, not the underwater cave, the Cerulean cave in Red and Blue where you find Mewtwo. That could be a neat one.
Yeah.
But, anything along those lines. Yeah. So there we go. DLC is still a question mark on Smash Brothers, but certainly potential, and I guess we have our fingers crossed for it. So there we have it. I think that is all the emails we have time for this segment. We are, of course, needing more, as per the usual, so you can send in all your emails to our email address, which Bally shall tell you once again, as a little reminder.
NYPPQuestions@gmail.com.
Keep them coming. Keep sending them. Go to your computer. Hit the keyboard a few times. Some letters may come out.
Press some letters. Send them over.
Send them
we
over.
will happily read them out.
We are going to zip on out of here and get to our third segment, where we shall be, of course, discussing video game guides. So do not go anywhere. We'll be right back. Okay everyone, welcome back to the third and final segment of our show here today, and as we outlined before, we are going to be discussing the video game guide, and our general thoughts on it, our past history, what we think going forward, and just opinions overall on the premise of a guide within video games. You may like them, you may hate them, but they are undeniably a very important part of just games in general, and kind of an interesting part of the medium. There's things like movies and films and what am I saying? Movies and films are the same thing.
Movies
books,
and music and books
and television, which there's no challenge, there's no difficulty there, but a game very unique in that sense, in that you must undertake it yourself. So I guess we'll get into this. Bally, what's your history with gaming guides? Where do you fall down on these?
Back in the day when we were too young to have the time, I guess you could say, to go out to the shops and pick up games. We often would send our parents, or specifically our mothers, to go and buy games for us.
Yes,
and
indeed.
This was obviously before Amazon was in full swing and people were buying most of their games online as well as digitally, obviously.
Right.
So I'd often send my mum and say, like, Mum, I've been working so hard at school, like, it'd be really great if I could get this game. And occasionally she'd be like, no, you've had too many games. And other times she'd be like, yeah, no, okay, right. What game is it? What's it called? And I'd say, right, the game is called X. And then often whenever I came back from school, And my mum was like, "Oh, I got you the game." I'd be like, "Oh, thanks, mum. Thanks for getting me the game." And then she'd be like, "Oh, and I got you this guide." And I'm like, "A guide? Really? Okay." It's like, "Why did you get the guide?" And then she'll say the typical, "Oh, the guy in the shop told me that you needed the guide to complete the game." And I would just say stuff like, "But mum, they're just like selling unnecessary stuff to you. I mean, guides are great and they're a real luxury, but you really don't need them for most games in general." So yeah, I guess guides that she bought include The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess,
Yes.
which I lent to you actually.
You did indeed. Yes.
So that was actually a good one, and I did use that occasionally. She also bought the guide for Lego Star Wars 2,
It's such a useful one, I'm sure.
which was really pointless. I mean, I was never going to go after all the collectibles in that game because the number of collectibles in Lego games are quite numerous, so there was not much point in that. So I just sort of explained to her, like, you really don't need them, and I don't think even today she still understands, to be honest. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I did used to use guides. We used to use guides quite a bit for certain games.
Yeah.
In particular, The Legend of Zelda.
Mhm.
The first main Zelda I got into was Wind Waker, and it still is my favorite. It's the game that got me into the series, really. And the first run through of that game, we played a lot of it together, actually. You at my house, or I'd
Right.
come round to yours, and we'd play it. And for many of the dungeons, if not all the dungeons, I want to say, we would print off like a GameFAQs guide, like in its entirety, not even in its entirety, like we'd print off a whole dungeon,
Yeah.
or like we'd plan the next 4 hours of gaming time we were having, and we'd say like, right, we've got this dungeon to do, let's print off this dungeon, and you would read me the guide, and I would just follow it religiously.
Right, it was basically like this strange pseudo co-op thing where I
Yeah.
was sitting there with a highlighter and pages just filled with text,
Yes.
dense text, because the way we printed them off, there was no spacing or anything. We didn't do any of that. You know, this is early internet days, right? Very early, and so the only way to get guides, if you wanted them in that sort of format, was either to go out to the shops and buy the really top quality ones with the pictures and everything and all the little charts and tables, or go to GameFAQs and print out just dense words on a page.
Yeah, no
and,
pictures
a lot
at
of the
all.
time, the way to do it, if you didn't want to be, spending a lot of money, was to go and do that, and that's what we did. And I would sit there highlighting as we went along and be like, okay, Bally, you need to do this, and I just highlight as soon as the thing was done, like ticking off a list. And it was, when we look back at it now, I feel like if we were to attempt to do that nowadays, it would be really uninteresting and kind
Yeah.
of not very fun, but it's kind of the context of the time and place and our
Yeah.
age as well, that it was a great experience, and I really enjoyed doing it.
It was great because we knew nothing about Zelda, really. I mean, we'd had so little experience with the series. We didn't know that there are multiple times where you're flicking numerous switches to open doors, stuff like that. So it was just that sort of helping a hand that was telling us, oh no, you need to do this, you need to do that. And like, it just made the whole experience really a lot smoother for us at the time. I mean, how old were we? Maybe 12, 13?
Maybe a little younger, yeah.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
around that
So
age.
at that age, I was a terrible gamer, like really
Yeah.
bad, really bad. And having the guide, and especially you there reading it to me, is like, it just worked really seamlessly. And we did a lot of the game in a short space of time as a result, like much quicker than we would have otherwise. And I guess really got me personally into Zelda, like
Yeah.
back then.
Sure. I mean, these days I feel like using a guide, a lot of people have the idea that, it's robbing you of the experience. You should be the one who is, getting into it and thinking about it and engaging with the game on your own terms. Where do you fall down on guides nowadays, Bally? Do you kind of agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I use them when I have to, basically. It depends on the game, definitely. Say it's an adventure game that has puzzle elements, whether it's like a Trine or a Zelda or something like that, and I'm stuck on a puzzle. I don't know what to do next. It really does vary for me how long I will attempt to hit my head up against a brick wall trying to work out how to do the puzzle versus look at a guide.
Right.
So I guess for Trine, there were some puzzles I spent maybe as much as 20 minutes just
Yeah.
trying out different things. And the great thing is that occasionally investing that extra time without the guide can pay off, and you do just naturally work it out, and that's a great feeling. I won't take that away from anyone, but likewise, I think endlessly hitting your head up against a brick wall is just not a fun way to play games, and that ultimately guides can really fix big issues with certain games when you're stuck. And everyone's different. I mean, some people work out some puzzles instantly, and others it takes a lot longer.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you bring up Trine 2 because that is really a very what do I say? It's
Okay.
no. Okay, let me just start that again.
That's interesting that you brought up Trine 2.
Yeah. I'll just go from there. Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up Trine 2 because I feel that the idea of frustration versus satisfaction is really at play within that game, where there are the elements where you're like, okay, I can definitely figure this out because the physics is so malleable that there are ways that I could do this that no one else can. And there are also kind of those things where you're like, well, I could attempt this for so long, but in the end, am I really going to get something that is worth it out of it? Is it going to be worth the time invested? And, sometimes in that game it really isn't because it's just experience orbs that you're going after. But I do feel that it's more the triumph of being able to overcome those is where it comes in. So, yeah, I do think you have to find a nice balance between what makes you super frustrated and what will eventually be worth the frustration in the end and result in a satisfying experience.
One mechanic in games that I have basically decided I'm always going to use a guide for, no matter what, because I don't actually like the mechanic I'm about to mention, and that is secret exits. I really dislike secret exits, and to name a few games I've played with secret exits: Super Mario Bros. U, Super Mario World, the small part I've played of that. They're really important in Star Fox 64 when I played that on the 3DS, and likewise in Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze there are secret exits on levels that lead to entirely different levels, and I just really don't like it. I don't know why. I just hate the idea of so I guess when you start the level, you know that there's a secret exit by and large, whether it's any of these games, because like either a map screen or something will indicate, oh, there's another way to exit this level. But I don't like the idea of just rummaging through the entire level where any single little secret thing could be a secret exit. All I want to do is play the level I have to unlock. I don't really care how I unlock it. I just want to play that new secret level. So with Tropical Freeze, I just went straight onto YouTube, and Game Explained did a great video that has all the secret exits in the game, and I just followed it and unlocked them. And some people will completely disagree with me on that and say like, oh, that's cheating, like that's half the fun of Tropical Freeze is that you have to find the secret exits, and for me personally, just finding them isn't much fun. I just don't like it. I don't know.
It's a weird mechanic because what it does require is a huge amount of repetition, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you don't find it first time, let's go through the level again. Oh, didn't find it again. Let's go through it again. And you end up in this loop where you're not getting anything new out of it, and you're kind of getting bored at the same time. And yeah, it's a weird one. It's definitely more associated with Nintendo games far more than any other company, I feel, just because of the way that they had those so embedded in their early classic games, and it's kind of a trope that they continue in a lot.
It's a real shame that it's so central to many Nintendo games and how it's continued. It's quite frustrating.
Sure, but yeah, I guess if we're coming to our conclusions on guides nowadays, do you feel that they detract from the experience completely, or would you prefer a world without guides? How do you fall down on them, Bally?
I would definitely not like a world without guides because everyone plays games in different ways, and some people like to just blast through games as fast as possible and don't like exploration. And I was kind of hinting at that with my secret level issue, secret exit issue, sorry. Although I do love exploration, is the thing. So it depends. It really does depend. I'm trying to think of other areas where I've used a guide. I mean, often it might not. I might know how to do something. I'm just not doing it well enough. For example, like a boss fight where I will actually want to watch a video on YouTube, and I guess that's one way we should mention of how guides have changed so much is that you now have like video guides and like showing you how to defeat a boss.
Right.
So often that like little techniques and how to improve the way you perform against a boss, you can really learn a lot from a video versus a written guide, for example. And I think that there are plenty of bosses I've needed like guidance on where the hell to run to and like the best technique for avoiding damage, taking damage, and dealing the most damage.
But you don't feel
Metroid,
like that's something that, I mean, comes within playing the game, you know, where you're supposed to, I mean, you have to kind of bang your head against the wall to some extent with those kind of things, because, you know, that's kind of the point of it a lot of the time. In Zelda is working out, you know, what is the weak points and what do I need to use and that kind of thing.
I mean, it depends completely on the game. I mean, for me personally, one of the toughest bosses I've ever faced was the Metroid Prime Ridley, and that whole boss is designed to fool you. So like, it's designed that you get the first 3/4 of its health down really quickly, and you think, oh, I've got this in the bag, and then all of a sudden, when it's on that final quarter of health, Ridley just goes into absolute rage mode, and it becomes a completely different fight, and you're like, oh my god, what am I meant to do? And like, I just kept on dying, and then I must admit, after a few times dying, I was like, I'm going to look at a guide and like find out the best way of doing this, because I'm just getting nowhere. So I wouldn't go to a guide immediately for something like that, like a boss fight where I'm stuck. But I would still be stuck on plenty of bosses had I not had the guide at some point, because it's a nice crutch eventually to get to, I think.
Yeah, and I think that is certainly one of those things where there is a certain stopping block point where you're like, you know what, I'm not making any progress. And for me, I like the idea of making progress within games when I'm playing them. I don't like the idea of sitting down, fighting a boss and getting nowhere. And, you know, that's my gaming session for the night, and I didn't really achieve anything. You know, I think the sense of achievement is something that I like to get out of the experience of playing games. And, you know, when you come up against, you know, a roadblock like that stops you, that's when you feel like, okay, you know, it's kind of worth it at this point. I'm not getting anywhere. I've got to try something else. And, you know, there are certain games where I will push all the way through, but it's kind of a rare instance that happens, because, you know, either I want to keep it pure for myself or whatever other reasons. But you were starting to move on to, I guess, the changing face of game guides and how things were moving in the video age, and you know, the rise of YouTube and Let's Play and all this kind of stuff, and how it changes things. There are very different games for me that make sense in video versus text. I think a good example is what I played recently was Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies, where that game it's really long, and it has a lot of different specific areas where you actually have agency and you have the ability to do things as opposed to clicking through text. In cases like that, it's very good and beneficial to go to a text guide, because it will tell you the thing you need to click, the thing you need to do to move the story forward, to move the plot onwards and get through it. So for, you know, visual novels, that kind of thing, I definitely lean towards you know, the text-based guides. But video has opened up a whole new world of possibilities, right? It really makes things much easier to get your head around and kind of understand what to do in situations. Have video guides helped you a lot more, do you feel, Bally, than text ones?
In many ways, yes, because they're often much more simple. the sort of boss scenario I was mentioning earlier is actually something I probably get stuck on more often than other issues in games, like especially with a game like Metroid. And obviously, I've played 3 Metroids this year, and there are plenty of times in all 3 of them, to be honest, where I just kept dying on the boss. And like after a while, you don't want to die on the boss; you want to defeat the boss. And like I was saying before, it's great reading some tips on how to defeat it, but the, for something that's, I guess you could argue, Twitch related, and it's about your genuine gaming physical ability rather than working out a puzzle necessarily. It's it's more beneficial to watch something like that happen. For example, I used to play and still try to play a lot of tennis. I feel like reading how to play tennis is nothing like watching someone play tennis. It's that kind of difference. Like you're going to learn a lot more about the technique and how to strike that tennis ball from watching a professional tennis player hit a tennis ball, not by reading a textbook on how to hit a tennis ball. And I feel like my main issue with bosses is a lot like that comparison, where I don't really want to read a guide necessarily. I'd rather watch someone do it, and it's also often a lot quicker, and yeah, I just think it's better.
Cool. Well, I think that there are lots of different ways that people produce video content these days. The most notable is, of course, the Let's Play, which is currently in great popularity over the past 5 years or so. And I feel like that has, to some degree, eclipsed the idea of a walkthrough. Much fewer people these days are uploading pure video walkthroughs, and they're always trying to add some flavor, their own personality to it through the guise of a Let's Play. When you're searching for something on YouTube, to help you out in a game, are you leaning towards the Let's Play side or to the walkthrough side? And can you even, find videos that don't have people talking over the top of them, these days?
There are definitely plenty of videos with people not talking over the top of them, especially with the Metroid bosses I've looked up previously. I'm really not bothered either way when I'm looking at stuff like that. I just want to find video content of the boss being defeated, really, because more often than not, you can just work out from the video without anyone talking how to do what they're doing, unless it's quite a complicated game. And most of the games I play aren't overly complicated.
Right. And I think that's an interesting thing, is that in terms of a Let's Play, it can be, kind of haphazardly structured. I do not envy someone who is trying to play The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess based on my playthrough, because I'm not there to provide the experience of do this, do this, do this. I'm just dicking around and trying to play the game and maybe get 100%, maybe not. But, I'm going for it, and that's kind of thing that's happening. But, when I am fighting against bosses and doing that kind of thing, I am talking and trying to, explain to people what I'm doing and how it's going. So I think there is definitely a trade-off where it's definitely harder to kind of pinpoint a moment within a Let's Play. It's much harder to find the specific thing you're looking for, but if you do find it, then it can more often than not be more helpful because of the person potentially, depends on the person who's commentating, of course, but potentially giving you that extra insight, which could be valuable. So yeah. I think another really interesting thing in terms of new ways of being helped through games is Nintendo's implementation of Miiverse in their platforms. Miiverse is really curious because it's kind of there as this platform for artists. It's this place for people to kind of chat about games, but it's also a really great tool for fixing problems that you have in terms of like, what do I do next? In terms of being a guide for people. And you can post screenshots, and so people know where you are in the game. I've done it a few times, actually, and it has actually worked. People go in there, and people will reply to you and will help you out. What's your experience with Miiverse been thus far, Bally, in terms of guides?
Really positive. It's nice. It's nice that the idea of another human being directly responding to you. That's a really cool feature for Nintendo to implement. And one funny scenario where I used it was Super Metroid, and there's actually a famous part of the game that apparently a numerous people get stuck on the first time they play the game, including myself. And it's basically an area where you have to run across some platforms that disappear very quickly. So like you have to be quick to make sure they don't disappear and you fall. But you can easily get to that up to that point in that game without using the run button at all.
Or even knowing the run button exists.
Like myself. So I had no idea it existed. I posted on Miiverse. I said like, I'm stuck on this bit. Can anyone help me? Thanks, or something. And then I think someone replied saying, "Oh yeah, it's called like the noob sprint or something, and it like had a certain name.
The noob bridge, I think.
Noob bridge, and it's just like this bridge where all the noobs can't get across it because they don't know how to run. And that's just a really funny thing. I mean, obviously the downside of Miiverse is that it's not always instantaneous, and if you're posting in a community that's not as popular, for example, I think the Mario Kart community is probably the most frequently posted in community because I can like do a Miiverse post in that community and I'll go back to the community 2 minutes later and I have to scroll down like multiple screens just to see my post, whereas if I post in, I don't know, Assassin's Creed 4 community, my post might be top of the list for a good few hours because I guess fewer people are playing that game. So it does depend on how often people are replying to you, and that's where the internet is obviously much better. I need to find this out. Let's look it up.
I mean, Miiverse is really cool, and it's a nice thing for engaging with people one-to-one, but ultimately, it's not very practical, right? Yeah. It's great, but it's this really boiled down format of a forum where you could go on the internet and get things done a lot faster than that. But I like it. I just like that you can just share a screenshot and there are people there who have played the game and know what's going on. So
yeah, that's
a cool thing.
Great, and that's something that would be tougher to do with an internet forum, and it's really nice that you can just post it directly.
Absolutely. So yeah, guides, video game guides, love them or hate them. I kind of, in the end, I think I fall down on really being someone who leans on guides when I need to, but I do like having that kind of own experience and being able to kind of graph my own path, but I certainly wouldn't want them to go away. I think that they are a core integral feature of the way games work, and I'm glad that they exist, because I could really hate some games otherwise. I could really hate some games that I ended up loving as a result. So
yeah, I just feel sorry for all those gamers who had to play games before guides even existed at a time when games were, by many accounts, much harder than now, like the original Legend of Zelda and things like that. Yeah. I think we live
a lot of that was the guides in those days were the playground, right? And
exactly.
People talking to each other and trying to figure things out. Aside from the Nintendo Power guides coming out in the magazines, that was all they had. So yeah.
Yeah, so we're living like in a time when it couldn't be more cushy. Like, it's nice. and I'm like you, NBZ. I love to lean on them when I have to, and I love having that option. And I'm sure many gamers are in this would agree with us that they're nice to lean on, but we shouldn't ever go back to the way we used them when we were 12, 13 with Wind Waker. Certainly, that was a bit over the top, but it worked at the time nonetheless.
Yes, excellent. Well, there we go. That is our opinions on video game guides. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a cool topic and interesting one to dig into. But that is pretty much going to close out our show. Before we go, we are going to, of course, plug ourselves. So, Bally, why don't you go ahead and tell people where you can be found on the internet?
You can find me on the Twitters at Ballyman. Exactly.
That was on the brain, man. The trailer.
I just can't get out of my head right now. At Ballyman91, BALLYMAN91, and you can also follow me under that same name on the Miiverse, which of course we've just been talking about. I try to post quite frequently on both, I guess. I've got quite a good record of posting on Miiverse. I'm getting a lot of yes. It's very satisfying.
Excellent.
Follow me on there.
Yeah, so you can find me. I am also on Twitter. I'm at Lordnbz, and Miiverse is the exact same. Lordnbz there too. We have ourselves on iTunes. We are a podcast that exists on that service. So you can subscribe to us there. It's an easy, good way to listen to the show because you can go anywhere and take it with you to your delight. So we encourage you to go and subscribe on iTunes. Also, before we go, we are getting into the end of the year. If you didn't notice, 2014 has kind of flown by, and we are kind of ramping up to Game of the Year stuff, which I'm kind of excited about. We're going to do some fun stuff surrounding that. So the plans we have laid out is that on the next show, we are going to be breaking down our top 10 games that we played this year, but that didn't actually come out this year. So we're talking about stuff like Bally's played Super Metroid and Metroid Prime, and I played Link to the Past. Games that didn't come out in 2014, but that we have talked about on the podcast and played. We want to differentiate those because otherwise we're going to have this mishmash list that is kind of hard to go through. So we're doing that for next week, or next show, should I say. And then the last show of the year, we're going to be doing our top 5 games that came out in 2014. And we would very much like your participation in this. So if you want to tell us your favourite games you played this year, whether they came out this year or not, send us emails. You can give them in a list format if you want. If not, just tell us the games you enjoyed the most playing this year, and we will read some of those out on the show and discuss them. So get doing that.
And that email address is nyppquestions@gmail.com.
Excellent, Bally. Thank you for picking that up there. Almost went end of the show without actually plugging it. So yes, you send us your emails. Keep sending those, of course. But we would like to hear from you about Game of the Year stuff. We'll be discussing it. So pretty sure that's it, Bally. Nothing else here.
I think so, but yeah, it'd be great to hear from everyone about what they've been playing and the top games of the year, because we have a lot of work to do in the next little while to plan our top games.
We do indeed. So without further ado, that is going to be us. So thank you very much for listening. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with another show. Until then, goodbye. The musical interludes used in today's show were Funky Waters from Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, copyright 2014 Nintendo, and Twisted Samurai from Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies, copyright 2013 Capcom.
I digest.